It's time to rock and roll!
I'll just yeah, I don't need you
Sure.
to record anything or anything like that. I just do it over the Zoom because convenience
Sure.
and
So you just use the Zoom microphone and all that?
yeah,
Sure.
it's fine. I don't need to impress anyone with my fancy non professional capabilities. Like the tagline of this podcast is professionally unprofessional. I thought
Mm.
about changing it at one point, but then I was like, no, it gives me that leeway to never try too hard. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like with podcasts, people just want to hear, some parasocial relationship happening. They just want to be like overhearing a conversation, right?
Yeah, it's like I used to be like really self-conscious about like, fuck, are these too fucking long? Like, are like who gives a shit about like my opinion on movies and stuff? And then like I've done like 6 hour podcasts, which are like embarrassing, but people listen to them still. So I'm like, all right, well, it just clearly doesn't matter what you're talking about as long as people like tuning in. So I'm like, okay, that's fine, you
And
know.
nothing's too long so long as you're on a commute, walking
Yeah,
around,
exactly.
driving. But do you edit at all?
I do. Sometimes have to trim around stuff, and someone might not want something that they said on there to be mentioned, and that's like it's totally fine. I'm not like raw dogging the podcast or anything like that. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't have to do anything. It's like I put the little intro and get rid of like the early discussions. I might keep this discussion in. I don't know.
Oh,
It's just
okay, we're talking.
yeah, we'll just talk. Hello, welcome back to the Waffle Press Hangouts.
Hard-hitting journalism.
Yeah, this is what a degree in journalism gets you, folks. A podcast with two movie nerds. One who is a hardcore screenwriter, very talented director. Just kind of the whole package. I'm your host, Diego Crespo, so that's not me I'm referring to. But my guest today is Avishai Weinberger. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm better now that you're here. We're trying to do more like conversational style like stuff on this podcast. I want to talk to people who are in the industry, and because Gene and I, one of my co-hosts and good friend, like we're trying to get stuff made basically now, but we also just want like to highlight like we're not going to get Christopher Nolan on the podcast. Like we know that. I will
Well,
ask, but
well,
I'll get a no. You know what I mean? But like we want to hear perspectives of other filmmakers, pals. Like it's also just an excuse to like talk to people and hang out. And we met over Twitter. We met when I found out you were in LA for a week, and then I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go watch No Time to Die tonight. Do you want to come?" And then I forced you into the heart of downtown LA to watch James Bond with me, and I I loved it. I remember you having a positive experience as well, but that's how we met. I was like, I got nothing else going on tonight. Come to the movie
yeah.
with me.
Then he gave me a ride back to my couch.
Yeah. I mean, it was, and then it started. You got the L.A. rain, the much spoken of L.A. rain, which is kind of a light drizzle.
Yeah, as we refer to in New York, air. It's I don't know. I actually honestly thinking back of the experience, I remember the difficulty of getting into the LA Alamo. I remember the movie. I remember chatting with you at the Starbucks. I remember the bride. I don't remember the rain, like at all.
It was just it's nothing. We people overreact here. Although it did actually get a little intense on New Year's. Like I'm not someone who gets all LA about. I've lived here my whole life and I've never been like terrified of it. It was actually driving to Gene's house for the New Year celebration. That was actually pretty intense. I was everyone was like 30 miles an hour on the freeway, just driving super slowly, and but that was a treat.
Oh
But enough.
man.
People don't want to hear about me. People want to hear about you. Uh, tell me
And
a
the
little.
weather.
And the weather. Yeah, what's the weather like over there? And then tell me a little bit about yourself.
Weather is a balmy like 40. I honestly don't quite know where to start. I don't introduce myself that often. What
Okay,
what
well
what
here
what,
here
what do I say?
let me give you a little on ramp then. So you like movies, you make them, you're making more. what like got you started on the path of like, I want to do this. I want to make movies.
Okay. Yeah, so I am a screenwriter who occasionally makes short films and hopes to one day expand beyond that to features. And I I think I got it. I think I owe it all to Godzilla. So like sometimes like when you're a little kid, like you'll hyperfixate on a thing, and then it'll just sort of be the thing, and then you'll hyperfixate on the next thing. So like I started off on like trains, like Thomas the Tank Engine and stuff like that, and then dinosaurs. And when I was in my dinosaur phase, my parents and I were walking down some like flea market, and there was a guy selling Godzilla VHSs, and I had seen like snippets of the 1998 American like Roland Emmerich, Dean Devlin Godzilla, and here's something like VHSs of these 1950s and 60s Godzilla movies, and we decided to buy Godzilla King of the Monsters, the Americanized 1956 version with Raymond Burr. And I have a memory of my parents saying, "You're gonna find this kind of boring. Like you're probably expecting something very flashy, but it's gonna be black and white and kind of slow and iffy special effects and all that." And I'm like a child, and we put it on, and it's like the coolest thing I've ever seen. And so then it's like dinosaurs are out, Godzilla is in, and just watching all of these Godzilla movies kind of warps a kid's brain because it's like, here's the coolest thing you've ever seen that is simultaneously very handmade. Like you can tell this is people in costumes stomping around miniature sets. And when you're a kid, you're like, there's no distinction between a miniature and a toy, right? You're surrounded by toys too. So you're like, I can do that. And so you start making little videos. And then that just sort of, goes from there where suddenly it's like, you can make these things. And I feel like that's an on ramp that I'm assuming a lot of kids get, but that was definitely mine. And from that point on, it's like, how do I make these things? And you got a little like summer camp stuff and learn about what a computer is. You sort of assume like, oh, to make a video, just turn the camera on and off, and that's a shot. It's like, oh no, you can actually cut it on a computer, and kind of went from there. Went to became obsessed with filmmaking throughout middle school and high school. I made a 40-minute found footage zombie movie and then a 70-minute found footage zombie movie in high school. The 70-minute one I actually made in my high school, where I would
Oh,
film. Yeah, so I got a bunch of friends. I was like, let's come in on a weekend. So I made an arrangement with our security guard where it's like, I'm gonna come in on a weekend with these people, and we're gonna shoot this found footage zombie movie. And found footage is like, because I don't need a crew or anything, it's just a camera and some people. And I bring in all these prop guns, like these machine guns and pistols and stuff, and I would show it to the security guard. He's like, "Yep, cool." And then we just run around the high school with these things, which is definitely not something you'd ever be allowed to do now, but made it. Went to I went to a film school for 1 year in Jerusalem called Ma'aleh Film School, which is extremely hands-on. It's like we're like in a house, and it's like a 4-year program that I did for 1 year, and it's like 12 people per grade, and you're all just like helping each other on projects, and it's like, here's directing class, here's camera class, here's editing class for your weekend project, or shoot a thing. And it's extremely hands-on and very intensive. And then suddenly from there to NYU film school, where it's like you're now in a class with hundreds of people, very decentralized. We're going to start by teaching you how to take a photograph, and maybe you could string some photographs together, and then we're going to teach you how to do sound dramas, and we'll teach you a whole lot of theory. So it kind of shifts away from that intensive guerrilla, like go go go, into super formal theory. And I shifted into screenwriting because I'm an Orthodox Jew and I have a hard time working on Saturdays, and that's when all my friends' projects would happen. So it was hard for me to get on crews because like, yeah, I can help you out for one of your 3 days, and it's like, well, writing I can do on my own time. So I shifted a little bit into writing, and then that's where most of my success has been. That's my very long-winded uh, life story.
no, that's great. That's what I want out of these conversations. And because I actually genuinely didn't know that about you. I knew we have similar tastes. We get along pretty well on Twitter, I think.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. And then we hit it off in real life too. And The Godzilla thing, I've worn this shirt on the podcast many a times,
Yes.
but it's been a minute since I have, so I was like, I'm pretty sure I remember him liking Godzilla. I gotta throw this
Oh
on for
yeah.
this one.
Oh, to this day, and it's an obsession of mine. And I guess to the people who are listening to this, do people ever watch the podcast, or is it entirely just audio?
It's usually audio, but people do watch the podcast sometimes on YouTube, and other times no one watches
Uh-huh.
them, even if I upload it to YouTube.
Okay. For listeners, Diego is wearing a sweet ass Godzilla 2014 shirt.
Hmm. Um, yeah. So this is not a question I had in mind, but which of the kaiju movies of the last decade is your favorite? Because there was quite a few,
Ooh.
surprisingly, and not just like from Toho and stuff like that. Although they obviously have the best track record, just top to bottom.
Kaiju movies of the last decade.
See,
Man,
because
okay.
like for me, I'll give you one. Like for me, it's Pacific Rim. Like Guillermo del Toro is just like kind of
Mhm.
he's on my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I really like Pacific Rim. I was kind of ruined for Pacific Rim because I read the screenplay for it before I saw it, and I'm like, this is awesome. And then I saw the movie, and they had changed a very key thing that I loved about that draft. And I'm like, oh no, they didn't do it. And suddenly it's like it just felt less special to me just because of that, but it's a pretty special movie. Um,
I'm gonna
was
need
it?
info on that later, but go ahead.
I will tell you. Hell, I'll tell it on the podcast. But I'm trying to think what my favorite kaiju movie is of the last decade because there have been a lot of really good ones, and also I'm not sure which one of them are necessarily like specifically to my taste because I realize, I love the big goofy special effectsy stuff, and I especially love what Legendary and Warner Brothers have been doing with these Godzilla and Kong movies. That said, it's starting to feel a little aesthetically like American blockbusters in general. And there's something about kaiju movies, especially growing up, not even just the fact that they're people in suits and it's so bespoke, but there's a vibe to them that I feel like it's really difficult to recapture that. And that's probably a whole topic of discussion. But I don't know. I don't know if it was this decade, but I really liked Gareth Edwards' Monsters.
Yeah, that counts as the decade. That's like 2014, right?
Was it?
That's
Okay, because no, because Godzilla was 2014, and he got
Oh
that
no,
Oscar.
no, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay.
Ooh, I don't remember, but
Oh, we'll
whatever.
count it.
I'm
We'll
gonna
count
say
it.
it because what I love about that movie so much is it really captures the awe of the size of these things and also the feeling of these things are in our world now. It by virtue of them existing in our world is changing. And the way we interact with each other and with the landscape has to fundamentally be different. It's like living in a world where hurricanes are just everywhere. It's like, well, it's not gonna be business as usual, And I particularly love the man on the ground feeling of that. My favorite parts of Gareth Edwards' Godzilla movie are the ones where we feel extremely small in comparison to these giant things. And yeah, like Shin Godzilla does that pretty well, I thought.
Hmm.
But I feel like a lot of giant monster movies almost. I mean, it's almost like a nexus where it's like it's coming the other direction too. But I feel like a lot of giant monster movies are kind of becoming superhero movies, and a lot of superhero movies are becoming giant monster movies where it's like what matters is this larger than life action and a whole lot of destruction. But I'm stopping to see them a little bit as forces of nature that are, you know, bearing down on you, and more as just, these cool things that are happening with a lot of special effects around them. But that's a whole conversation.
No, no, it totally isn't because the it's so funny. Like the superhero conversation will always come up. It just does on like conversations like this. And I'm not gonna. People don't need my rants on it anymore. That's why I have this podcast because I've done
Sure.
so many of them. But like like the idea that these movies, even like the ones that kind of espouse more progressive stuff that I agree with, right? Like there are very few of them that are not like they're not interested in ideas or conversations about like coexistence, like
Hmm.
not in terms of like coexisting with like Hydra or something awful like the villains, but I mean like the ideas that these characters change the world around them. The movies are never very interested in that. or even the television series very often, which is something I'm interested in as like a comic book nerd, right? Like I like
Yeah.
when we explore like how these evolutions in science and technology shape the world around them. Like these are science fiction stories. We should be exploring the science fiction aspects, and very rarely do I get that explored, and that's disappointing.
Yeah, it's like my feeling on it is like there's the like what it's about and how it's about it of it all. And like I watched Black Adam relatively recently, which is a slick movie, and I had fun with it. With I have my criticism, but I had fun with it. But I also felt like this is a kaiju movie. This is people with godlike powers just wrecking each other and destroying the world around them. And we're not really seeing what I love in kaiju movies, which is the people getting caught in the debris. I'm seeing the debris, I'm seeing the destruction. I want to see the people getting caught in it. Like my favorite shot in the trailer for the 2014 Godzilla movie, which I think they changed in the final movie because they added the Muto that's fighting him. But there's this shot where we're in like a closing bunker and we're looking up at Godzilla roaring like over like just overbearing like a skyscraper right above us, but the doors are closing, and it's like that's the feeling I want. I want to feel like you know the imminent impact of there's a skyscraper sized thing that is coming at me. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
like that's something that you're not gonna get anywhere else. And what's a really good recent kaiju movie? Nope.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you know what? Because like are we cool with spoilers on this
Yeah,
podcast?
yeah, nope. Well, we've been hammering away.
Okay.
That's like a number one, number two of the year.
Oh
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And what I mean, something that I love about that, like, even if they didn't reveal that actually it is a living creature, like even if they just kept it as this is a flying saucer that's sucking people up, that thing is not just objectively huge, it is subjectively huge. And it is subjectively huge in relation to very specific people that we come to care about,
Mhm.
as opposed to just, man, that thing is like 50 feet tall. Like it's not because I think in stories that's how we relate to things. It's not about objectivity. Otherwise, it's like God. There's an anecdote. I'm trying to remember the name of the writer who gave it, but there was a writer who gave a speech. It might have been Matthew Greenberg, but there was this writer who came to a festival that I attended who gave a little panel, and he had an anecdote about being pitched on a story by an executive. It's just like I have an idea for a movie. I want you to write it. There's this asteroid coming, and it's it's uh it's really big. And I think it was Matthew. Like Matt's like, well, and yeah, and what's your is the story that it's like, is this like a deep impact? Is this like an Armageddon? Like what's happening? It's like, oh no, it's really big, you know. And he used that in his anecdote about how like that's not what a story is. That's that's an image. But like even then, it's like big doesn't mean anything, you
Mhm.
know. Like if you're using CGI animation, programs to create something, the Godzilla that is gigantic, in these MonsterVerse movies is, it exists in a non-existent space here, and you're just building it on your laptop, like it's pretty small, right? It's like, you have a person in a costume, like okay, that person that costume is 6 feet tall, right? Size is entirely subjective, so how do you make us feel it? And the ones that can really make you feel it, that's what I love. Like Godzilla versus Kong, I had a lot of fun with. I really loved the fight on the battleships. The Mechagodzilla fight felt a little empty to me because they're destroying the city, and like after the first few shots of it, we lose track of any people on the ground. Right? There's like a handful of protagonists off on the side, but like all these buildings are being destroyed. Are they empty? Are they full? Has the city been evacuated? Are they killing millions upon millions of people, or is it just wrecking Tinker Toys? And I lost sense of that, so it stopped feeling huge to me. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stuff that I'm always thinking about with kaiju movies, and whenever I'm watching a 1970s Jun Fukuda movie, like the original Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, I'm like, whoa, he got skill there in that shot. That's so cool. It doesn't really matter about the technology being used. It's all about perspective.
Yeah, so let me ask you about that, because otherwise I'm gonna talk about how much I also love the boat fight in Godzilla versus Kong, because it's like there's so much to
Yes.
keep track of there. Like the geography is pretty simple, but like the literal like balancing of the scale on the boats. It's like that's tons of fun. So
And
like
scale is so specific there too, because
yeah,
like, what do you have to compare them to? The ocean, that's massive. The boats, okay, we're getting there. These planes, it's like, okay, I have a very specific direct. There are three things in this shot, and I get a sense because one of them I know how big they are, you know?
yeah. So like as we're basically occupying the low budget filmmaking space, right? So like when you're
Yeah.
making stuff, like how do you decide like what you even want to like create in this the smaller space, you know? Like
Mm.
because a lot of people or everyone who wants to write has like a big idea. Like generally speaking, people have big ideas, and it's like, well, I can't do that right now. I need to make something to. I think our mutual friend Liam O'Donnell said you got to make a movie to make a movie.
Yes.
Yeah, which is a great saying, and it's definitely something I'm taking to heart right now. Trying to figure out what movie to make the movie. It doesn't mean you don't try on that other movie. Just there's steps you've got to take, unfortunately, and sometimes very fortunately, because experimenting is also you discover new exciting ways of telling a story. But yeah, like in this space, because I very fondly remember your sock short, your missing
Mhm.
sock short. What was it called again? Was it Defeated?
Yeah, so like when we send it around to people, the label is just socks, but at the end the title card is defeated.
Okay, yeah, because it's a punchline, but
Yeah.
it's very funny, and you play it like a straight up horror movie. Like it is very sincerely like a horror movie for a sequence that I don't want to give away. Like I did just give away like the punchline, but I promise it's worth checking out. I'll link it in the descriptions below. So like, how do you go about that like idea in particular?
So I guess I sort of divide my projects into two buckets, right? There's my screenplays, which I'm writing not necessarily with the sense that I would be able to make them myself. And then there's the stuff that I pick up a camera and go do. And in that bucket, in the actually go make it bucket, so it's socks. So my sister Tova is an actor, and 2020 lockdown, we're all in a house together. This is before she moved out, and we she in particular was getting this creative itch of I gotta make stuff. I gotta make stuff. And we were shooting little cute videos with her where she would have ideas and like she would act around in a squirrel girl costume, do a little music video. But she put out a call on Twitter at the time that was like, anybody have an idea for a short film? And she was not even talking to me. And Mark Price responded with this very long and interesting idea for a movie about the alternative world of socks. Where do socks go when they get sucked into the laundry machine? It was this very complex, structured story, and honestly, he can still go do that. Like I think it's great and worth pursuing. And Tovis shows that to me, and I'm looking at him like I'd like to do something. I can't. This is a big thing. This is quite the endeavor here. This builds out a world. This has multiple characters, and it expands beyond a handful of sets. And it's like, what do we actually have right now? We have a laundry room. We have ourselves. I have an iPhone. Um, Tova ordered a bunch of socks, and I just wrote what is the simplest version of it that we can potentially shoot in a day in a laundry room with my iPhone. And that's really all it was. Like there wasn't a crew of any kind. There wasn't much beyond that. It was just we're having fun. So I wrote a little script and then I turned that into a very rigid shot list. And it's like, all right, we're gonna work through the shots, one at a time, and eventually I'll cut it together. And that was that. And that's I feel like that's not super indicative of how I normally shoot shorts, you know, because that's like the smallest kind of short I've done in recent years that I would call like a short that I would show people as opposed to like a funny little video. And but Blank on the other hand, so Blank is a short film that you've seen, and I shot it shot it in summer 2021, finished it this past year, and it's out to festivals, and that's like a real short. Like it's a half hour long, which is way too long for a short, but and we shot with a crew and all that, and that came about for the same reasons as Socks, but it went in a different direction. So in that situation, Tova wanted to act in something that she could be proud of. I wanted to get behind the camera again. It's like, well, let's write something. But unlike most of the stuff that I write, where sky's the limit, like let's just tell the story we need to tell. It's like let's take stock of what we actually have access to, because we wanted to make sure we could actually do this. Like, let's say the most we could do is shoot it on an iPhone. Like, let's say it turns out we can't get a crew together, a handful of friends at most. We just have an iPhone. What can you do? And so we kind of kept a list, basically. Like, as we were outlining the story, we were very clearly like, let's do something in the playground that's down the block because we have that. The piers are right there. That's production value. You get the skyline. It's stuff like that. So it's three actors, and occasionally some elements would come in that we didn't have. Like Tova's like, I really want my character to have a fish. It's like, why? It's like, I just think it would be good. And so we bring it in, and then it takes on some, I guess deeper thematic significance if you want to look for it. But that's the kind of element that we actually extended ourselves to. Otherwise, it was basically locations, keep to a minimum, but keep to places that we have access to with enough variety so it doesn't just feel like we're stuck in a garage, but very close together. It's all within a 15-minute walking distance. Um, three actors, small handful of props, essentially no special effects. We're just telling a story about people, and the biggest special effect is going to be the performances. So it was a challenge. It was a limitations. Breed challenges, but they also breed creativity. And within that, we were able to come up with a story that we thought resonated with us, that thematically had weight, that could keep us actually invested in wanting to tell the story. That gave our actors something to actually work with instead of just hitting beats. And I guess to answer your question, it was just a matter of looking at what we had, being reasonable about what we don't have but we could get, pushing that to the limit without going too far beyond the limit, and then making sure that within all that we're still telling a normal human story with a real dramatic core that no amount of special effects added or detracted would would thin out, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean a couple things. So like one, all of your actors in blank kill it. Tova
They
has one
do.
scene that I specifically, when I after I saw it, I think it was like the first thing I responded to. I was like, that moment was really remarkable, and I was just like, I kind of had like a holy shit moment. Like that, I'm not going to say it for when the public gets to watch it, because it's a great short film. You should be very proud of it.
Thank you.
But that one, I was like, damn, like, ooh, like you'll know when you see it. That's what I'll say. Um, and also to shout out our buddy Mark Price, who's just kind of like
Yes.
an idea machine. Because like I have conversations about him with we share ideas, we spitball and stuff like that, and I'm definitely someone who's like, oh yeah, I have this idea, and I'll do like a log line or a synopsis, and I'm like, yeah, I'll finish that in a second, and he's like, yeah, I finished this other pilot, and I'm like, what? Like what? How do you work that fast?
He's out there doing the thing. Like he comes up with an idea. He's like, I'm gonna write this script, hell or high water. All right, I've got that one in the drawer. What's next?
Yeah,
And honestly, that's probably the healthiest, best way to actually become a writer. First, a good writer, then a working writer, because it trains the muscles that you need. You sort of work out whatever kinks you're still working out. You're gathering tools as you go. You're developing instincts. Like that's yeah. No, he's doing the thing. It's really remarkable to watch.
yeah. That dude will go places for sure.
Yeah.
And I'll work on responding to him faster, because sometimes I'll see the message earlier in the day, and I'll be like, I'll be out or about, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I got it. And then he has this
Oh
great idea,
yeah.
and I'm like, well, I can't just like respond with like a, oh, that's great. I got to be like, well, now I got to bounce back with something, you
I'll
know?
get a message from him that's where it's like I've done pages today. Like I just reworked my outline, and I'm just like, cool. And it's like a sincere, like cool, but like I don't know what to say to that. That's awesome. Keep doing it.
It's like I don't have something to give you yet. Please wait for me. Like
It's like
I'm trying to be faster.
it's like you're like correct. You have done this. Good, good. This is great. Don't stop. You know.
Yeah.
But he's not
Um,
gonna, so it's great.
yeah. And but of course we're blank. So like you mentioned like the locations like really helped sell a production value and like this I mean that the New York skyline is like that really I think sells the talking about scale again and stuff like that. Um it's strange. I don't know if this was your intention, but like there's also a specific image. I don't want to give away the elements of the film, we'll say, but it made me feel very small towards the end, and it made it scarier. Like the world's very big, and these people are just a very small part of it, and that left me feeling a little strange. And I don't I don't usually feel things like that from horror short films. And that's not like to say that there's like stuff that's not great out there. I mean, you have another short film that we have to talk about, Third Date on Altar,
That was my thesis film.
which is just an outstanding short film. Over 1 million views on Altar, by the way, everyone. So we're
And counting.
and
I got a
counting.
little I got a little certificate from them about that. That was really fun.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. I mean, that's another one. Like you have these ideas that are definitely like they're dramatically sound. They're generally speaking genre oriented. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think it's usually going to have a genre element or two in it.
Okay. And but you can also read more into them if you'd like. I think they leave some breathing room for legibility on the audience's part. Or it's just like here's a story that you're watching with like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's like I think the key to like really hammering home like genre filmmaking. Like we can have all like the bells and whistles we want. Everyone loves the Sam Raimi cam. I love the Sam Raimi cam. But
Everyone loves the
some
Sam Raimi cam.
yeah. I mean, he's the goat. But you want a little more there. But yeah, tell me about your thesis film then. That's because
Sure.
that's quite the idea you had there.
So the thesis, Third Date. So that I shot that in 2017 for my advanced narrative class, and shot that in 4 days. So I think it was 3 consecutive days, and then we had a break, and then came back for a fourth. And it is a horror movie about a this woman who goes on a date with a guy, and her self-esteem is, for personal reasons, extremely low. So this guy who has red flags to him, the fact that he is kind to her and is showing an interest in her is enough to make her look past those red flags. And I'd say it probably doesn't reveal much to say that there is something more to him, and she has to make some choices with regards to how this date's going to go. But yeah, it's so I go to a lot of film festivals, usually as a screenwriter. There's a lot of genre festivals have a screenplay component. And sidebar, if you're a screenwriter and you want to figure out what to do with yourself as a, like professionally, submit to these festivals that have in-person components, because then you go there and you meet people. And there's really no better way to to figure out your footing in this world than to actually meet other people who are doing the same thing as you. But I go to a lot of these festivals, and a lot of the features that show, tend to be on the lower budget side because they're submitting to horror film festivals. And there's this consistent genre of movie takes place in a house or in a cabin or in a blank that's relatively small and contained with a small number of actors. And that's for budget reasons. You have to make your movie, and but locations are extremely expensive, and the fewer company moves you have to make, the easier it'll be for you to actually get your movie done, on a budget. Um, so the question is, how do you work within that constraint while still giving something compelling? And on both of these short films, Third Date I shot in 4 days, Blank I shot in 5. Third Date is 20 minutes, Blank is 30. So that was just a lot of really quick running around. The question is, you hit this wall of reality. How do you make it interesting within that? And it's so worth watching these cabin movies, these house movies, and analyzing what makes this one distinct from this one, distinct from this one, what makes this one special or this one not special. And you'll find it's a combination of things, but it tends to come down to, are these compelling characters with a conflict that is, thematically interesting, like conflict, theme comes from conflict, right? Theme comes from arc, it comes from flaw, it comes from disagreement about a concept or, an outlook or a behavior, and the way that it's sort of tested over the course of the story is through conflict, and you get whatever, lessons or conversations you want out of that conflict. And you can do that on an empty stage, you know. And so then, now you have the benefit of having a visual medium where you can use, lighting and blocking and framing to, in production design and all these things to further this, but can't really lose track of that. You're trying to tell a compelling human story most of the time. How do you do that within the limits that you have? And so you were talking about those rainy camera moves, and I really hope that one day I get the kind of budget where I can just let loose with something like that. But on both of these shorts, particularly on Blank, because on Blank we were just, we're just hitting the ground running. We do not have time to get anything, particularly elaborate. You start prioritizing and you realize this scene here of two people talking at a table. If I want enough, material that I can actually shape the conversation in the post, and I can actually adjust the performance and play with pacing and all of these things because the special effect is the performance. I want full latitude to work with that. I don't really have time to set up, a camera kind of revolving around the table or swooping underneath, and you start to realize you don't really need that to get to the emotion you're trying to get to. It's all that really matters is, number one, are you getting enough material to actually cut together a story? Can you actually convey the information? Then number two, are you working to you know I guess, do you have your eye on perspective? Is the camera in the place that you just put it in for a reason, or is it entirely third person objective? And maybe you do want it to be third person objective, and the question is why. Do you want it to feel like, we're divorced from the emotions of what's happening here? Maybe you do. So you think about all these things, and you think less in terms of what is the coolest, most show-offy, virtuosic way I can do that, which there's merit to that. A lot of film festivals are full of movies that are just, look at me, I can do things, hire me. But I'm rambling a little bit, but like
No, no,
in my
no. I
perspective, yeah,
encourage it.
in my calculus, if I don't have time to show off, all that really matters is, are you telling the story, and are you telling it in a way that controls the emotional questions that you want the audience to have? And you could do that very simply, and you could do that in a way where people aren't even really paying attention to how you're doing it if you're doing it well. So, for example, there's a scene in Blank that I alluded to where it's two people sitting at a table talking, which is as non-dynamic as you can get with blocking, and you start to think, how do I make that interesting? I have to get a wide of the approach. I have to get the two shot. I want over the shoulders. I want individual shots. There's specific inserts I need. Oh, that's all I have time for. Shit. Okay, well, let's do that. And within that, let the performers experiment with their performances. And just there are little things that you can do to kind of spruce things up, but at the end of the day, just keep the camera focused on the people who are the item of the story. Like, that's what we connect with, and make sure that we are looking at them from a perspective that make sense emotionally. The short, more eloquent version is just you do not have time to do insane virtuosic things on your little short film, but that doesn't mean that you can't tell your story emotionally and impactfully. And there is elegance and simplicity. The question is just, are you in control of that simplicity? And then, within that simplicity, you can then get longer takes that you can then work on in post. Like for that particular scene that I was just talking about, the table scene. Because we were so short on time that day, we ran these series takes, where instead of cutting and starting again, we just kept the camera running, and the actor would say a thing, and then I would say, all right, look, keep rolling, let's take it back from, and then we would bring it back to a particular line, but I'd give a tweak. So we have these endless takes, and you get magic out of that. Like, the actors hate it. The actors hate it. They want to finish. You're telling them to get to an emotional high point and then say, hey, take it back to that point where you were chill. But what you do that enough times, you get some interesting options, and then also you get some looks, some glances that you don't realize are going to save you in the edit later. And I have a friend who shot a low budget feature on 16 millimeter, which on the face of it is just really impressive. That's like skydiving to me. Like, it's just terrifying, but it's like, if you can do that, if you can pull it off, that's awesome. A downside is, number one, film processing, that eats into your budget. Two, you're just loading every time, like, eats into your schedule, which also eats into your budget. And three, you can't get as much raw footage as you would like. So fewer setups, fewer takes. And then you're kind of left with, maybe you don't love the performance that you have, and maybe the pacing's a little weird. Whereas you're shooting digitally, with motivated angles, but with more than one angle. You run these series takes. You can get some real magic out of it that you can then actually play with in post and create something that's seamless, but also just really effective. There are a couple of shots in that scene I was telling you about where the actors were giving each other, responsive looks. Just like they would say, like, one of them would say something, the other one would give a look that might seem exasperated, but they were just reacting to either me telling them, let's take it back from, or some traffic noise that shut us down for a moment. It was like, and it works, So the shortest version of all of this is story first, emotion and story second. Any sort of show offy things, that's champagne problems to have.
Yeah.
Does that answer anything? That was
no, that does.
a
No,
lot
no,
of
no. That was great. That was great. This is exactly why I asked you to come on and talk about this stuff, because I find it so fascinating. Something I have to keep in mind, And yeah, this is exactly what I wanted this conversation. I don't know how much time I have you for, but I won't keep you like forever. But
No, I am not particularly busy today.
Okay, great. So the next 3 hours we can discuss the glass onion spoilers. No,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
Shapiro territory. I love it.
oh no, oh no. Let's stray away
First of
from
all,
there.
yeah.
Oh no. Stray away from that as far as possible.
This movie was about me, and I don't like it.
Yeah. But like there you go. There's another movie that's very economic with, like, it's shot not super flashy. Like, it kind of opens flashier with like the editing and the cross cutting and stuff, but
Oh,
not
here's actually an interesting example, because when I was watching that, I was paying close attention to, what is it doing with this camera? Because I'm trying to expand my own visual vocabulary, in regards to what I might actually do on a set. And there is one scene in the middle with Daniel Craig and a second character sitting at a table on a balcony. And on page, that is two people at a table talking. And so what does Ryan Johnson do? He gets these aside from the standard, we get the punch-ins, we get the over the shoulders, we get the two shots. We have the camera kind of moving, crossing, changing to 180. We have where the camera is on one character, we kind of drift back, and then that character refers to an object that's there, and the camera zooms out for a second to reveal that object, zooms back in, moves back over. It's the benefit of having a $40 million budget is that you
Yeah.
can make is that if you actually know what you're doing narratively, you can make any scene visually, dynamic. Um, if you don't have that kind of budget though, there's stuff you can do to make it interesting, and it really just comes down to why is the camera there? Why are we
Mhm.
cutting to the why are we cutting to this angle? Whose perspective are we a lot, I guess glomming onto for this, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I mean, another big thing that um like I don't know if you heard him talk to Joseph Kaczynski with that Variety like directors on directors.
No.
Okay, so I think you'd like that because he specifically references that scene in particular to
Hmm.
describe what you just described. Because he was like, it's dialogue. How do you like make it different and interesting? He's like, well, he made it like 3 acts through the camera decisions and like the crossing of the eye lines, the
Uh-huh.
object you just referenced, he used that as another one, and it was like his description of that. I was like, oh, like I would never. That's why he's Ryan Johnson, because I would never have
Yeah.
figured that out. You know what I mean? Like,
I guarantee that scene took all day. Like that doesn't fly off. So there is one flashy thing I did in that scene I was telling you about with the table. That nobody has noticed. Which on one hand, part of me is like, yes, nobody should notice. It should be subconscious. But part of me is also like, this is further proof that it doesn't really matter if you're just telling an interesting story and people are wrapped to what's happening on screen. But the first half of that scene is entirely static on tripod. And there is a specific moment where the conversation destabilizes, where I had our DP take the camera off the tripod and it becomes entirely handheld. And nobody has, if they've noticed it, nobody has pointed it out. Um, and I'm hoping that it gives a sort of destabilizing effect to what we're watching. Um, but it's entirely a subconscious thing. And at the end of the day, somebody watching it, if you ask them, what did you see in that scene? They say, I saw these two characters having this conversation, you know?
mhm. Yeah, I guess I have to rewatch it now. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, but I guess another just technical question. Then I want to move back into screenwriting too, because you mentioned that that's kind of like your. Is it fair to say that's your primary focus, screenwriting, or is it just kind of like something that you started with and then evolved back and forth between that and directing?
It's my primary focus, and I think I think the more you know about the process of filmmaking beyond screenwriting, I think the more equipped you'll be to write a script that actually feels like a movie.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to know all these things about directing and, camera, bullshit.
Mhm.
But yeah, screenwriting is my main thing.
Okay. Uh-huh. I want to get your take on lens choice and stuff like that. So, because I've had discussions with other filmmaker friends who like they want to basically utilize as many lenses as possible to try to convey different things, and that's easier said than done, of course, and they also understand that to their credit. Um, but they like exploring like the visual palette, like getting as dynamic while being true to the story, like being as dynamic as possible with like lenses. And like as someone who's like really gotten into photography the last couple of years, it's kind of it's the most reliable form of income for me at this point too. Like I love practicing like or trying out like old vintage lenses and stuff like that. Like these old there's a lot of old Soviet lenses that you can get really cheap for like 30 to 50 bucks on eBay, and it's like,
Wow.
oh, this is so cool, and I'm like, is it like good for like someone's headshot, you know what I mean? Like maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And it's like that's something I try to keep in mind as well. Like I just want to get your opinion on like when you go about like directing, like how do you choose that?
So I guess sort of my disclaimer is kind of fundamentally, I think it shouldn't have to matter. If like if all you have is an iPhone, I think you should be able to tell an interesting story, so long as the story that you've written is interesting and you have, compelling performers and you know where you're putting your camera and why, and with lighting that is to the benefit of what you're doing. But that said, there's this line that James Cameron had in his masterclass that has stuck with me. Have you seen his masterclass?
I actually have. It's been a while. I don't remember the exact line you're referring to, but I imagine it's something along the lines of the audience doesn't give a shit, which is like,
No, actually, no. I mean, that's his, that's his way of being in general. But like, he has this
yeah,
great line because he was talking through, I think, the nightclub scene in Terminator, and his line was along the lines of, "Lens choice is about the memory that you would have if you were there." Um, which is just fascinating. Where it's like, if you're thinking back, I am in this story, and I'm at a nightclub, and I see the Terminator across the room, right? And I'm sorry, and the Terminator is the thing that I see, but he's across the room. That's not a wide lens, right? That's a long
Mhm.
lens because I'm seeing him across the room, so there's the distance, but I'm focused on him, right? So you are essentially zoomed in on something, and other things might fall out of focus, but it's all kind of stacked on top of each other. Whereas like, I'm in this place, this crowded place, and I'm just overwhelmed by everything all around me. That's probably wide. So it's I think that's probably just remedial. It's probably like 101 stuff, but it's you know like, let- let's say it's a close up, right? Um, like on shooting blank or third date or conscience or some other stuff. When you're just working fast, sometimes it just kind of comes down to, we only have enough room to put the camera here. You know, we have to use this lens because that's the only lens that can get the framing that we want. But sometimes it kind of comes down to, how in the moment do you want to be, right? If you're doing a long lens with a shallow depth of field, that can give you a feeling of you are alone with this person. That might give you sort of a romantic vibe, or a cannot escape sort of a vibe. Wide lens on a person feels very real and very you're in the space too, right?
Mhm.
So I think I think it's an effective tool, and that's kind of my. I guess that's my attitude when it comes to all sorts of things, what be it lens choice or structure or any kind of formalistic thing. I don't think there's a right or wrong way necessarily. I think they're tools, and I think it comes down to, what are you trying to do, and do you think this gets you there? So like, you could be a Dogma 95 guy and just say, I'm going to stick to one lens. We're not even going to use lighting. It's all going to be practical. And then that gets an effect that you're chasing. Or you can say, I'm going to get really finicky shot by shot. It really matters to me, lens choice. In this particular scene, I want to feel like there's a little bit of a distance from the world, but they're not entirely removed from it. What kind of lens gets that? Or um, we're so locked in on a person that we want to get a certain level of anxiety, that we that but we're still looking at the person. Maybe that's an extreme wide, maybe, or that's an extreme long lens, and you're just framing it so that you're not getting anything else. That compresses something. Like, it all gets an effect. So I guess short answer is, what effect are you looking for, and do you think it gets you there?
No, that's a pretty good answer. You're on a roll with those actually. But like
Yes.
let's shift over to screenwriting then. Let's start dialing back on that. So you have a lot of ideas. I've read some of them. They're of course terrific. Um, how did you like start? Because
Mm.
like if I just speaking for myself, I was like I just straight up, in the Google search bar, how do you write a screenplay? Because I was like, well, how I don't remember how old I was when I first started dabbling, but I did not know what I was doing. I still probably don't know what I'm doing, but I
Mm.
like what I'm doing anyways, you know what I mean? But like I just searched that, and then it's like, Aaron Sorkin pops up, Robert Town, people like that, like I think they tend to be the standard, whether or not you're a fan of some of them. Maybe I have some choice words that I don't need to repeat in the podcast for certain people I've seen, but that's how I did it. So like when you get started there, what is young Avi's mode to writing your first screenplay?
So started young. When I was, I'm going to say 13, and I'm going to have to double check on that. I wrote the first script that I actually typed out. I had done a lot of stuff in notebooks. It was a lot of fanficky stuff. Like my first thing I think was like an Alien sequel that I wrote in like a couple of like Marble notebooks,
Yes,
which
this is
yeah,
why we're friends.
yes. I mean, I'm sure you might have some words for that young version of me because I'm pretty sure it was like an alternate Alien 3.
Oh, that's
But
everyone's go-to, except for me. But yeah, go ahead.
but the first thing I ever typed out was around when I was 13. I typed out I guess a serious remake of Plan 9 from Outer Space because at the time, I'm a kid and I'm like, why do they only remake good movies? I say they should remake bad movies because nobody likes the originals and like the new ones, you have a chance to finally make it good. And I God bless my heart, I thought I was writing a better version. And I wrote it in Microsoft Word. Pretty sure I think I just kind of wrote it out and then eventually learned what the margins were and just like line by line fixed the margins. Um, it was an exceedingly long script. And I think I followed that up with like kind of like a Wizard of Ozzy kind of a sequel, like sort of a remake kind of a thing, which I wrote in some free screenwriting program that was like in a browser, just sort of cloud based. I feel like that's how a lot of people start, where they're just sort of typing out IP they don't own in programs that are not really, top of the market, and that's fine. Like I have a very specific memory that when I was a kid, it was after Spider-Man 2 had just come out. Like, I'm gonna write Spider-Man 3. And I sat down and I typed on Microsoft Word a like 40-page Spider-Man 3 because I didn't know how long it was supposed to be, and the formatting was garbage, and the script itself was garbage. And I went to my parents had a college reunion, and I went to the college reunion, and there was somebody there who was a working screenwriter, and I told him about this, and he says, "Oh well, you should write in Final Draft. What don't write in Word, write in Final Draft." And I'm like, no, I'm gonna write in Word. And like and I actually met up with that guy years later. He's a mentor at Cinestory, and we laugh now. But that was kind of how it started. And then in high school, I got a little bit more serious with it because I'm making movies, right? It's all about I want to make movies, and in I had just done this 40-minute found footage zombie movie, which was not scripted. We had like an outline, but it was otherwise kind of improvised. It's like I'm gonna write a sequel, but this one I'm actually gonna write a script for. And I wrote like this long ass script, in like Celtics, and followed that up. I was like, I like writing scripts. I'm gonna write another script for something I'm not gonna make that takes place in like the origins of Purim. And I wrote like a long thing of that. I go off to my gap year, start writing these a little bit more serious, attempts at scripts, all in Celtics. Come to NYU, don't have, can't be on sets as much as I wanted, so I'm not stretching that muscle as much as I want. Lean into screenwriting, start taking screenwriting classes because they're mandatory, but then just because it's exciting. Um, so I start more seriously diving into writing scripts that I would actually want to show human beings, and all along the line, I'm just devouring any book I get my hands on. It's about screenplay structure, like that. And I've been doing that my whole life at that point. Like just ever since I was a kid, but especially in college, it's like, I have a bookshelf lined with them. I read like this book is your story about Robert McKee, like the classic sort of like, oh, you're a screenwriter. Name one Robert McKeeism. It's completely like it's sort of like the cliche, and it's long as hell and super dense. But like I devoured that, and it's you know, every week or so I would like go to like the local bookstore and it's like, are there any more books about writing that I haven't read yet? And yeah, eventually kind of grew out of that, but that's how I got into it. And then in college, in my junior year, I had a feature writing course that I decided to take. Where the professor is Professor John Warren. I had him as my freshman shorts writing teacher. He had a program for juniors and seniors that would only accept 14 students. And it was a 2-semester program. So I got into that. And the first semester is just learning about structure and outlining. And you are outlining a feature script. First you just write kind of like a premise, then you write like, a paragraph, then you're outlining act one, then you're outlining the whole thing. And every time you're showing it to the class and you're getting notes. And in the second semester, you're turning that into a feature script and you write 30 pages at a time. And there's a rotation. Eventually, when it's your turn again, you better have your next 30 pages. And you do a table read in the class and you get reactions and notes. And, I was writing this werewolf script at the time. I had my first 30 pages. We read it out in class. Teacher says, so I think you've got some issues with your protagonist goal, I think is not necessarily clean enough, but you know what? Write the next act and then, eventually you'll come back and sharpen it. And like later that night, I get an email from him saying, I was wrong. You got to rework this before you do the next 30 pages. I'm like, oh shit. So then I spend that weekend, like what is a clear way I can rewrite this first act, like character goal so that it's, so that it's clean and so that it's direct and so that I can survive this class. And I had to come up with something. I took that to my professor and I had to like pitch why it worked. And he's like, okay, do that. And, that was sort of my first big entry into the world of, oh, this stuff actually has to like work. Or this actually has to pass muster. That script of mine ended up being the first script I wrote that actually started placing in contests. It got me a general at Dark Universe, RIP, which was really fun. They had this great, lobby with a gigantic Frankenstein monster lab that you pull a lever and lights flash and stuff. But anyway, that was I would say that's probably the first thing that I wrote that I would feel kind of comfortable showing human beings, and then just ever since then, hopefully improving. By the way, one of my classmates in that class, his project ended up on the annual backlist.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Yeah, and he wound up on there like a couple more times. Like he's doing great.
Oh yeah. I mean that's always great to hear. Like and sometimes you could tell like, oh, that person's gonna like they're gonna sprout a little faster than the rest of us. And I'm glad you brought up your professor John Warren. Because I also kept up with the screenwriters coffee class, I believe it's called, right? Is that?
Yes. So in lockdown, he got antsy about wanting to, about being a professor. It's difficult to be a professor in lockdown. So he created an online course that now has a bustling Discord.
Yeah, I have not joined the Discord. I'm terrible even at my own podcast Discord.
He's not on it. He's not on it. It's it's run by his assistants, who are basically the caretakers now of his online empire. But yeah, he creates it's a really interesting thing that he's created where you can opt into these digital courses and there's ever the professor, like there's assignments and in the Discord you can share what you've had so far and get feedback and whatnot. It is a net positive thing.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it helped during that. I mean, it helps consistently. It's always great to like tune in. Like, oh, they're talking about something I didn't think about, or like, oh, maybe I disagree, but like I could see why that's beneficial to someone else. Like, very healthy screenwriting environment, at least from what I've seen there. And yeah, but that first year where like literally no one left the house, I was like, this helped a lot. It kept me sane. Yeah, so I mean, I guess I was surprised you brought up the Dark Universe thing because I wanted to know if I could bring it up just because I was curious about like what was that like. I think that production area of the industry sort of has an air of mystique around it, I guess we'll say.
What like in the sense of
Like okay,
general meetings or
like general meetings, and then also literally like the Dark Universe like office you mentioned, which because I have heard you describe the office before and it sounds like it sounds like the Van Helsing lab almost, which I love. And
I'll
we
send
only
you a
got
video at some point. I have a video on my phone.
oh yes, please do. But like I'm fascinated by it. They've only got one movie made. But
Yep.
yeah, what was the general meeting like for that specifically? And do you have any advice for people going into general meetings?
Sure. So that was my first ever general meeting, and I was like still in school at the time. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I'm like a babe in the woods in this whole thing. I'm just sort of like, wow, the movies. Like now I think I have a much more measured understanding of that world. But like at the time, it was just I was hip pocketed by a manager, which means that there was a manager who took an interest in this one particular script, but didn't necessarily want me as a full-time client. So he had set up a meeting between me and a fellow at Dark Universe, which at the time had yet to release The Mummy. So I flew out to LA. And what this means is that the fellow at Dark Universe, so if I recall, it's been a while, was a creative executive. But what it means is he read my script, liked it, not enough to want to buy it, which is most situations, but enough to want to know what kind of a writer or in person I am. So I flew out, got incredibly lost in the universe a lot, found their bungalow with their office, which, you know, after Dark Universe fell apart, I have since tried to look up I've since tried to look up this article and I could not find it. But at the time, I read an article that was talking about like sort of a what the hell were they thinking kind of article about Dark Universe. And there was a little mention of they spent like thousands of dollars on this ornate lobby with a diorama of Frankenstein's lab, and now it just sits covered in dust. And I remember reading that, being like, "Oh, but it was so cool, though. I'm glad they spent that weird amount of money." But you show up, you show up, and you're in this lobby, and there's an assistant there at the desk who's like, I'll let you in shortly, but in the meantime, pull that lever, and a lot of cool lights happen. And then eventually you go into an office with an executive and you chat and you just kind of shoot the shit. Like they want to know about you and you want to know about them. And you're talking, and he said he talked about some of the fun projects that they had lined up, which sadly never happened, and some stuff that some Dark Universe stuff in particular. And talk to him, a bit about who I am and what kind of stuff I want to write. And, he offered to hear me out in a couple of pitches. And then that was it. Nothing ever came of it in the sense of, he didn't pursue any of the other pitches that I had. Dark Universe fell apart. That's how most general meetings are going to go, right? It's social. They want to know who you are. But it's crucial too. That's how you meet people, and that's how you get a sense of the industry, and that's how they get a sense of you. And you never know what will lead to something professionally. But in the meantime, you know, to like early 20s me, I was just like the coolest thing in the world. So general meetings, usually are either somebody has read your script, or they haven't read your script, but somebody managed to get an intro, and you're basically sitting down with a producer or an executive or a rep or somebody, and it's entirely just to get a sense of you as a human being, because they can get a sense of you as a writer from your writing, but they want to know, are you somebody who they might potentially want to work with down the line, or are you some difficult weird person? Is there something simpatico going on here? Is there not? And it's a lot of fun, honestly, if you're not the most anxious person in the world. But yeah, I would say my piece of advice to anybody who finds themselves in a general meeting who is not already kind of seasoned at it is just kind of be yourself. Don't get too rehearsed about it. It is a casual thing. Let them lead, but also make sure that you're answering their questions, but also asking them questions. Ask them about them. Get a sense of who they are, what they do. Do your homework in advance, but be open to hearing it all again. And when it comes to pitching other projects, read the room, because sometimes you might feel like, wow, we are really clicking at that. You want to hear some other stuff I have, and sometimes you're like, this is, this we have clearly sort of run the course of the conversation, and this person doesn't want to sit down and hear about other scripts I've written. So, it's people reading, but keep it casual and have fun with it, and don't be a dick. Like don't come in and say like, oh, you guys produced Fast and Furious 17. Oh, I hated that. You know, like don't like you know don't shit talk. Like if they shit talk, maybe you can find a place where you can kind of jump in and do the same. But like in general, like nah, we're here to make friends. We're not here to be dicks. So
Yeah, I like that. 'Cause, like, I've not found myself in that experience yet, as of yet. But I think it's important to just. I think that's good life advice for any like kind of career. Just like you want
yeah,
to get along with the people you're working with. Like, if you don't get along, it's not going to be a good fit. Even if they're like, okay, like we can make money together. If you don't get along though, like it's gonna be like pulling teeth. Everyone's had a bad job. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, it doesn't like don't be fake. Like don't be a sycophant. Don't be like, oh, that thing. Oh, I love that. Like don't be insincere, but steer towards positivity because there really isn't a benefit otherwise. If they ask you like, we had a box office flop lately and the critics hated it and we're proud of it, but we feel like it didn't really work. Um, what do you think about it? You might you might start off with positives you like, maybe gently get into some things you think you could have done a little bit better, but don't be like, and another thing, like that's not, it's you know. And by the way, if the general meeting is not going well, it's not going to go long either, so don't worry about it. Be nice, be good. Don't get confrontational. If it's going poorly, if you really don't get along with this person, you're probably not going to be in there that long anyway. So you just be civil until you have to be out of there.
yeah, that's I think that's a pretty good note to end on. This conversation went very well, so it's the opposite of a bad general meeting. But
Eh,
it's it
you'll
is
edit
always
it to
a
be better.
yeah. There you go. We're gonna leave you on a high. Yeah. I mean, it's always a pleasure talking to you. What do you have going on that you can talk about, or do you have any social medias that you'd like people to check out?
um, so right now I have a few projects. Well, I have the short film blank, which is on the festival circuit, and hopefully we'll eventually find a home online that you could all see. I have a few screenplays in development with some companies that I really hope to have some good news to share about soon, but nothing public at the moment. Um, when that does, you know, hopefully if things go well, if I do get some good news out of that, maybe we can talk about that side of the business because it's way more complicated than I thought, going in. Um, Socials, I'm on Twitter at Avishai W, and I'm on Instagram at Avishai Oddity. That's Avishai. And yeah, I'm annoyingly prolific on Twitter. So if you need to find me there.
Yeah, you say annoyingly, I think wonderfully, because I think screenwriting Twitter has, how do I put this? It tends to have a connotation. I don't
Hmm.
think you fall into that. I have never read, honest to God, I've never read something you've said where I rolled my eyes or was like, oh geez. Because some
Oh, then I'm
people
not working hard enough then.
no, no, but like there are definitely people who I even admire who will like tweet something about form or structure or that godforsaken slugline debate that happens every other
Oh my
week.
God.
And
Okay, so
it's
you know what that
so
all reminds me of?
ridiculous.
You know what that all reminds me of? So like first of all, like I love damn near everybody on, screenwriting Twitter. Certainly like the people I interact with regularly, like I think they're just the loveliest people. And generally generally it's all the conversation is great too. Every so often, out of some weird dark recess of Twitter, some stupid debate will come out, and suddenly we have to talk about these things that do not have a bearing on screenwriting. Like I'm sorry, like slug lines. Like if somebody is reading your script and they see your slug line is bolded, and they're like, "Well, this isn't professional," and they throw it away. Like that's not a person who was ever serious to begin with. Frankly, so much of what screenwriters, particularly early screenwriters, get obsessed with, and I was certainly obsessed with this stuff when I was new and reading book after book. So much of that is outside in stuff that is not actually relevant to the quality of a script. And it always feels to me a bit like criticizing an actor's performance based on the haircut they had. You know, it's like that's presentation, sure, but but if you're looking at that and not their performance, then maybe their performance wasn't particularly interesting, or you're not looking at it right, you know? And whenever I see like, oh, you wrote "We See," that's bad. It's like it can be bad, it can be good, it can be neutral. How is it here? You know, like what is it? How is it here? Because it is a tool like a lens. It is being used for a specific thing. Is it being used well here? And I've seen scripts that do everything quote unquote right that left me cold. So, you know, it's there's stuff to get over. There God, I'm getting sidetracked again. But I gotta
It's all right.
but like there's this screenwriting retreat I like to go to called Cinestory, which is expensive as hell, but it's nonprofit, so it's okay. And one of the mentors there, I think it was Philip Eisner, had a great bit of advice, which is you're always told show, don't tell. It's like, well, sometimes you got to tell something. You know, sometimes you just need to get something clear on the page that might be super clear in the theater, but isn't clear to the executive reading it. And you know, sometimes you have to go a little bit too far, and then eventually they'll pare it back. But you have to go far enough just so that there's no confusion. Like show and tell. It's like, you know what? Do what your story needs. You know, that's what it all comes down to. Do what your story needs. Don't go by a checklist. Don't go by friggin', you know, how long is this dialogue block? You know?
Yeah, yeah. Ridiculous stuff. But you yourself have not been ridiculous. Thank you again so much for doing this. When I'm in New York, I'll hit you up. You're in LA, please hit me up. We'll hang again because last time we just watched a James Bond movie, and I'm glad we did. But you know, there wasn't a lot. You had a busy week that week, anyways. But like it was you know, we could actually just hang out and like shoot the shit some more because this has been a blast.
Oh, 100%. If you're ever in New York, hit me up. If I'm ever in LA, you know, you're getting a call. And before we end this, I should tell you what they changed to the Pacific Rim script.
Yes, please do, please do. This is now the best note to end on.
Okay, so, and I understand why they changed it because, you know, this was before Guillermo del Toro came on board, and they restructured the whole thing basically to, you know, there's stuff in the original draft that was very cool, but also potentially alienating. And when you have a $200 million movie, you need to make sure that your risks are mitigated. So I get it. But in Pacific Rim, you need 2 pilots per Jaeger, and they share a mental bond called a drift, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the current movie, Raleigh Beckett just lost his partner, who it's been a while since I watched. Was that his brother?
It's his brother, yeah.
Okay, cool. So he loses his brother, who's his partner, and they need to pair him up with God, I'm embarrassing myself. What's her name?
Mako Mori.
Mako. Thank you.
Yeah.
God, it's been a while. Okay,
Yeah,
Mako
it's like
Mori.
my favorite,
And
so that's
yeah,
one reason
yeah,
I know.
yeah. And I've seen it enough times, I should know. But Mako Mori is eager to, you know, to be his new partner, and they, you know, there's a little bit of you know, some tension there, but they you know, he sees her into her past, and they become you know, they become close, and they become, you know, they become allies in the film. The original draft, Raleigh had lost his brother, you know, a year prior to the beginning of the story, essentially, kind of like in the current film. Nakamori just lost her partner like yesterday. She had been a pilot. She just lost her partner. It's really raw to her. Military is like, I'm sorry, we don't have enough time to let you heal. We need to pair you up with somebody ASAP because these monsters are coming and they won't stop. And so they decide to pair her up with Raleigh, but she's really reluctant to join with him because she has this open wound of just having lost her partner. Also, he only speaks English and she only speaks Japanese. And so they do not have a literal way to understand each other. So it's about how do they bond with each other while still being, you know, without actually being able to understand each other. And they need to bond in order to get the drift going so that they can pilot the robot. If they can't get the drift going, the robot's inert. And partway through the movie, like halfway, when they start actually connecting emotionally, in the drift, they start to understand what each other are saying, like they're in a poorly dubbed Japanese movie. And I loved that so much. And I was like, this is so exciting. I can't wait to see it. And then the movie comes out. It's like, well, we figured it would be difficult to sell as like, this language barrier and, there's a lot to like, and I'm like, well, damn it. Maybe in the sequel. And then they didn't.
Yeah,
But, broader lesson here is you write a script, it's going to go into development, it's going to become something different. It is not a bad thing to become something different. I am sad that they lost that, but I am happy that Pacific Rim is a movie, and it wouldn't have been if it was just sort of left the way it had been in its earlier draft. People come in, it becomes a collaboration. You get notes, you evolve the thing. Guillermo del Toro brought in his signature sensibilities, and it became Pacific Rim as we know it today. And I guess this will be the note I end on. Like, you're gonna write a script, rewrite it, get notes, rewrite it, get it to a point where somebody's finally excited about making it, and then maybe you're gonna sign some sort of agreement, and then you're gonna get notes, and you're gonna get notes, and you're gonna get notes, and then they're gonna attach a director, and you're gonna get notes, and they're gonna attach an actor, and you're gonna get notes, and producers will have notes, and distributors will have notes, and you're gonna keep on working on the thing. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. And stereotypically, it's considered bad, but that's just the process. And so you have to be open to it and able to kind of go with that flow and make all sorts of lemonade.
yeah, that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you for that. Now I do wish that had been in the movie, and also completely understand why it wasn't, because producers and the language barrier thing is
Yeah.
probably
The
on
more
par with
money
that.
there is, the more butts you have to get into seats, and the fewer obstacles you want to that. And somebody looking at something and saying that looks too weird for me might not show up. So I get it, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. He should hold on to that idea for another project he has. I don't know what, but like
Oh, good.
that's a fantastic idea. Just like this been fantastic conversation. Again, thank you so much for joining me. Links down to all the stuff Avishai mentioned down below. You know our social medias. We don't know if we're gonna keep promoting it, just because social media is in a weird place right now. So unless anything changes, you'll hear where else to find us. I added links to the Discord. Start of the new year,
Cool.
so check that out. Everyone go check that out. I promise to start popping in there more often. Yeah, this has been great. So thank you everyone for listening. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. If you didn't like this, like and subscribe anyways, because you might find something you do like. But if you didn't like this, that was rude. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We have been professionally unprofessional. And